My name is Natalie Brennan. I'm 29 years old. When I got married last September, my husband gave me a Tesla. My sister demanded I give it to her. My mother said I was being selfish. My sister took the key fob anyway. I know because 40 minutes later, I got a geofence alert on my phone telling me my car had left the property. I was still on the dance floor when I called it in. By the time Cassidy made it to her apartment complex, there were 2 police units waiting. She made it exactly 4 miles. I want to tell you how we got here, but first, if you've ever been the one who always figured it out, the one who was counted on to give and never ask for anything back, stay with me, because this story doesn't end where you think it does. My father's name was Gerald Brennan. Everyone called him Jerry. He worked as a floor supervisor at a distribution center in East Charlotte for 22 years. He coached my soccer team when I was 8, even though he didn't know the rules. He made pancakes on Saturday mornings in the shape of animals, badly, and called them abstract art. And every Sunday, without fail, he saved the last donut for me. Not because I asked, just because he knew I liked them, and he paid attention to things like that. He got sick when I was 17. It started as fatigue, the kind you can explain away for months. By the time they found it, the cancer had moved into his lymph nodes. He fought for 2 years. He lost. I was 19 years old, in my second year of nursing school, when my phone rang at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. My mother's name on the screen. I was sitting at my desk with the anatomy textbook open to page 243. I remember the page. I don't know why, I just do. I picked up, and she didn't say anything for 4 seconds. I already knew. I drove to Carolina's Medical Center in 30 minutes. My sister Cassidy was 14 years old and sitting in my mother's lap in the waiting room when I walked in. Mom was stroking her hair. Cassidy was crying. I stood there in the doorway for a moment before either of them looked up. No one asked if I was okay that night, not once. I told myself it didn't matter. They were grieving. I was grieving. We were all grieving. But the thing is, someone did ask if I was okay the next morning. It was my father's coworker, a man named Dale, who barely knew me, who caught me in the hospital parking lot as I was walking back to my car. He said, "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" And I had to press my back teeth together very hard to keep from breaking completely in front of a stranger. My mother said it to the pastor at the funeral. "Natalie will be fine. She's always been the strong one." She said it with love. I want to be clear about that. She said it because she believed it, because she had watched me for 19 years being capable and steady and not much trouble. She wasn't wrong that I was those things. She just didn't ask why. The month after the funeral, I started sending $400 home. I did it through Zelle, late at night after my shifts at the clinic where I worked part-time to cover my own tuition. I never mentioned it. My mother never asked where the money came from. She just used it and said things like, "I don't know what we'd do without you." In the same breath, she used to tell Cassidy to follow her dreams. I saved every transaction, not because I was keeping score. I want to be honest. I saved them because I had already learned by 19 that memory in our family was selective. And I needed at least one record somewhere that said, "I was here. I carried this. This happened." Cassidy was 14, and then 15, and then 16, and the world was arranged around her. I don't blame her for that. She didn't build that arrangement. She just grew up inside it and came to understand it as the natural order of things. Natalie handles things. Cassidy needs things. That's just how it works. I finished nursing school with a 3.8 GPA while working 3 night shifts a week. I got hired at the ICU at Atrium Health straight out of graduation. I found my own apartment, signed my own lease, paid my own bills. My mother called to tell me she was proud. Then she asked if I could help cover Cassidy's spring semester tuition because money was a little tight that year, $3,200. She said, "Your father would have wanted you to help your sister." I wrote the transfer that same evening, not because I wanted to, but because the only thing harder than writing that transfer was figuring out how to say no to a woman who had just used my dead father as leverage and genuinely not realized she'd done it. The month after that, Cassidy posted photos from a weekend trip to Nashville. The caption said, "Treating myself, I deserve it." I looked at it for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and went to make dinner. There's a particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. I got good at recognizing it in myself over those years. It showed up after phone calls from home, after I canceled plans to do something for my family, and then watched that something be forgotten by everyone except me. After the fourth time in 6 months, I rearranged my schedule to drive Cassidy to an audition or a casting call or a media workshop she'd found on Instagram because she didn't have a car and Uber was too expensive. And she sat in my passenger seat the whole way there scrolling her phone. The fourth time, I drove 40 minutes to a community event space on the east side, pulled into the parking lot, and she looked out the window and said, "Actually, this doesn't feel right. Can you take me home?" I sat with that for a second. This doesn't feel right. I drove 40 minutes back. She was on TikTok the entire way. I lost a Sunday overtime shift for that trip. $340 I'd been counting on. When I dropped her off, she said, "Thanks, Nat," and got out of the car. She didn't look back. That was the day I started not answering the phone right away. Nobody noticed. That's the thing about being the reliable one. When you start slipping slowly, carefully, everyone assumes you're just busy. They don't consider that you might be deciding. Around this time, James and I had been together for 8 months. He was quiet in the way that meant he was paying attention. He worked at a certified Tesla service center, Holbrook Auto Systems, over on Wilkinson Boulevard. And he had the kind of technical mind that expressed itself as patience. He understood systems, how they worked, why they failed, what it took to maintain them. He also understood people in the same way. One evening after I'd gotten off a call with my mother, she'd needed me to look into whether Cassidy's renter's insurance situation was something I could help with, and I'd said yes before I'd even thought about it. James looked at me from across the kitchen table and asked, "Does she ever call just to check on you?" I didn't answer right away. I sat there for a moment and tried to actually think about it. I went back through the last 3 months of calls. 11 calls from my mother. All of them had started with, "Hey, so I have a question," or "Hey, I need to ask you something." Not one had been just, "Hey, how are you?" That's it. I said, "No, not really." James nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. He just started paying attention in a different way after that, watching what happened to me after family contact. The way I got quieter took a day or two to fully come back to myself. He filed it away. He didn't tell me what he was planning. He just started planning. That night, he called at 11 p.m. from his drive home just to say he'd been thinking about me and hoped the shift had been okay. I held the phone in my hand for a long time after we hung up. I didn't understand at first why that simple thing made my throat feel tight. Then I did. It was the first time in recent memory that someone in my life had reached out with nothing attached to it. No ask, no favor, no because I need something. Just, "I was thinking about you." I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for about 4 minutes. Then I got up and went to bed. I had a 6 a.m. shift. The roof situation happened that summer. My mother called to say a contractor had found rot under the shingles and the whole left section needed replacing. The estimate was $4,500. She had $2,700. She asked if I could loan the rest, $1,800, and that she'd pay it back when she could. I transferred the money the same day. I screenshot the transaction. Not because I didn't trust her. I just had the habit by then. 2 years passed. The loan was never repaid. It was never mentioned. When I brought it up once, gently, she said, "Oh, I thought you gave that to me." She didn't apologize. She didn't offer to figure something out. She just rewrote it, the way you'd correct a small misunderstanding. "I thought you gave that to me," as if the word loan had never been said, as if I had imagined the Zelle notification that still existed in my transaction history. That same year, she gave Cassidy an $800 mirrorless camera for Christmas. To support her creative journey, she said. I heard about it at Christmas dinner, at which Cassidy spent most of the meal photographing her food. My last real birthday gift was a $25 Target gift card. I was 23. I still have it. I'm still not sure why I kept it. Maybe because throwing it away felt like agreeing that it was enough. Maybe because keeping it was its own kind of record. I stopped expecting anything by the time I was 25. Not because I was mature about it, because expecting things had started to feel dangerous. Like standing at the edge of something and choosing every single time, I think in time, to lean out a little further. Eventually you learn where the edge is, you stop leaning. What I didn't understand then, and what I've thought about a lot since, is that my father saw it. He saw the whole thing. About a month before his final hospitalization, he pulled me aside after a family dinner. Cassidy had been upset about something, a performance she hadn't gotten, and the whole evening had orbited her. And he said, Don't let them forget you're here too, Nat. He said it quietly, just to me. He looked tired. He looked like a man who knew his time was limited and was saying the things he needed to say. I nodded and told him not to worry about it. I've thought about that sentence almost every day since, not because it solved anything, but because it meant he saw. In the middle of all of it, the disease, the logistics, the family holding itself together with whatever it could find, he saw me being erased. And he said something. That's more than most people get. I didn't understand the weight of it until much later. James proposed in February of the year we got married. He did it in his apartment, just the two of us, no performance. He got down on one knee on the living room floor next to his coffee table, and the ring was simple and exactly right. And when I said yes, he held on to me for a long time without saying anything. I thought about my father in that moment. I thought about how much I wished he could have met James. I thought about how James, this quiet, technical, steady man, had spent 8 months figuring out exactly what I needed before he'd said a single word about needing me back. We set the date for September. The wedding would be at the Larkspur Estate in Ballantyne. An event space with gardens and a covered terrace and a parking lot large enough for guests who were driving in from out of town. 100 guests, a live band. A dinner reception that James had largely planned himself because he understood that planning was a form of love. And he loved me. 4 months before the wedding, he came home from work and sat down next to me on the couch and said, "I want to show you something." He pulled out his laptop and opened an email. Tesla order confirmation. Model 3 long range. Midnight silver. Delivery date. 2 weeks before the wedding. Name on the registration. Natalie Brennan. I stared at it. I couldn't speak for a moment. He said, "I've been putting away for it since we talked about the future the first time. I wanted you to have something that was completely yours. Not borrowed, not shared, just yours." He paused. "I know what it's cost you, not having things that were just yours." I looked at him for a long time. I said, "James." He said, "I know." I didn't cry. I almost did. I took his hand instead and held it. A week before the wedding, he took me to Holbrook Auto Systems, after hours, and walked me through every feature of the car with the same patience he brought to everything. He showed me the Sentry mode, the exterior cameras that record constantly whenever the vehicle senses movement. He showed me the geofence alert, a perimeter you draw in the app. The car sends a push notification to your phone if it exits that boundary. He showed me the remote lock, accessible anywhere with a signal. He showed me the live camera view. He set the primary account under my email. He handed me the phone and said, "All yours." I went through each function carefully. I asked questions. I took my time. When we were done, he said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Like I have a very expensive security system." He laughed. It was a real laugh. Then he said, "Your family is going to react when they see it." I thought about that. Probably. He said, "It doesn't matter what they say." I nodded. I believed him, a little, and I remembered every single thing he'd shown me about that app. The week before the wedding, I drove the car to work for the first time. I parked it in the Atrium Health lot and sat in it for a moment before going in. The seat had adjusted to my settings automatically. The screen said, "Welcome, Natalie." I sat there and thought, this is what it feels like when something is actually yours. No conditions, no loans, no rewriting later, just mine. I went into the hospital and worked my shift. September 14th, a Saturday, the Larkspur Estate. Hair and makeup started at 8 in the morning at a salon on South Park Road. Cassidy was there. She was a bridesmaid, the only one from my family, because my 2 other bridesmaids were friends from nursing school. We were all in chairs getting our hair set when Cassidy looked over at me and asked, casually, like she was asking about traffic, "So that Tesla thing, is it actually yours or is it a lease?" It was 8:15 in the morning. I looked at her in the mirror. "It's mine." She nodded and looked back down at her phone. She typed something. I watched her in the reflection. The particular focus of someone sending a message with a decision behind it. I turned back to my own reflection. The stylus kept working. I filed it away. The ceremony was at noon. It was short and true. James and I had written our own vows. His were 3 sentences long, and each one was better than anything I'd read in any wedding speech I'd ever been to. Mine said, "I choose to be here, every day. In the way you have taught me someone can be chosen." My mother cried. My aunt cried. I was steady, the way I always am, but this time I was steady because I wanted to be, not because I had to be. After the ceremony, guests moved to the lobby for cocktail hour before dinner. I was making my way through the room, accepting hugs and congratulations, trying to see every person who had come. The afternoon light came through the windows and made everything gold. At 2:15 p.m., Cassidy pulled me away from a group near the windows. She had clearly been building up to this. She stood close and kept her voice low, and she had a whole argument prepared. She said I had two cars now, really, since James and I would both be on each other's insurance. She said she had been driving a car with a cracked engine mount for 8 months, and it could go any day. She said that Tesla would help her build her content brand. She needed the aesthetic, the image. She said she wasn't asking to keep it forever, just for a few months, maybe 4. She said, "You don't need it the way I do." 12 people were standing within conversational distance of us. She didn't lower her voice for any of them. I looked at her for a moment. I said, "No, Cassidy, it's not available." I said it the same way I'd say it to a patient asking for something I couldn't give them. Clear, not unkind. She stood there for 10 seconds, then she smiled, that particular smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "Okay, just thought I'd ask." And she walked away. I turned back to the room. I picked up the thread of conversation I'd left. I stayed present, but something in me had gone very still. At 3:30, my mother found me near the gift table. She guided me to a corner of the room. Not publicly, not dramatically. This was the private version. She stood close and spoke quietly, in the way she always did when she wanted to say something without it being overheard. And she said that Cassidy was struggling, that she was really struggling, and that I had always had more than I needed, and she really thought, that the right thing, the loving thing, would be to help my sister out. "Don't be selfish for once, Natalie." She said it softly. She said it the way you'd remind someone of something they already know, like I had a long-established history of selfishness she was gently calling attention to. I stood there in my wedding dress. I held my champagne glass. I looked at my mother, and I felt 22 years compress into that sentence. Every dollar, every canceled shift, every loan rewritten as a gift, every birthday forgotten, every call that started with, "Hey, I need something," and ended with the thing being gotten and never mentioned again. All of it. In 6 words, "Don't be selfish for once." I said, "I need to go say hello to a few people, Mom." I walked away. My face didn't change. My hands were steady. My throat was tight for exactly 3 steps. And then it wasn't, because I had learned a very long time ago to close that off quickly and keep moving. The dinner hour started. The band played. James found me and held my hand between courses. I laughed at the toasts. I ate my food. At 4:47 p.m., I reached into my clutch for my lip gloss. The key fob was gone. I stood at the edge of the terrace and didn't panic. I've worked enough ICU nights to know that panic is a resource you can serve for moments when it will actually help. This was not one of those moments. I closed my eyes for 3 full seconds. Then I opened the Tesla app. The car was still in the parking lot. Location, northeast corner, where I'd parked it that morning. I could see it on the map, a silver dot, stationary. I set it to sentry mode, which meant the cameras would now record anything that happened around the vehicle. I noted the timestamp. I put my phone in my clutch and went back inside. I didn't know when she'd taken it. Sometime between 4:15, when I'd set my clutch down at the dinner table, Cassidy had been sitting 2 tables over, and 4:47 when I'd reached for it. 32 minutes. I played back the afternoon in my mind, where Cassidy had been when she'd excused herself, when I'd last actually seen her. At 4:58, my phone vibrated in my clutch. Push notification. Your Tesla has left the defined geofence boundary. I was standing near the bar. I excused myself from the couple I was talking to, said I needed to check on something, and stepped into the hallway outside the main reception room. I opened the app. The map showed a blue dot moving north on Providence Road. Speed, 34 miles per hour. Direction, northwest, toward the intersection where Cassidy's apartment complex was located. I stood in the hallway for 7 minutes. In those 7 minutes, I did 3 things. The first, I called 911 and reported an unauthorized use of my vehicle. I gave the dispatcher the VIN number, the license plate, the registered owner's name, mine, and the live GPS coordinates from the app. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She asked where I was. I said, I'm at my wedding reception. There was a pause on the line. Then she said they would send units to the last known location. I said thank you. The second, I activated the remote lock function, which would prevent the vehicle from being started again once it came to a stop. She'd be able to park it. She would not be able to go anywhere after that. The third, I pulled up the Sentry mode footage, found the 60-second clip from the parking lot that showed Cassidy approaching the car, using the key fob, opening the door, and getting in. I forwarded it to the dispatcher's callback number as supplemental documentation. Then I put my phone in my clutch, walked back into the reception room, and found James on the dance floor. He looked at me when I walked up. He didn't ask what had happened. He had learned me well enough by then to read my face. And he read it now, calm, deliberate, the particular flatness I get when I have handled something and it is handled. He raised his eyebrows just slightly. I nodded once. He nodded back. The band started playing our first dance song. He held out his hand. I took it. We walked to the center of the floor. He put his hand on my back and leaned down and said, close to my ear, "You okay?" I said, "I will be." He said, "Good." The music was slow. His hand was steady. I closed my eyes and danced. Cassidy made it 4.2 miles. I know this from the police report. According to the report, she was attempting to turn into the parking lot of Brookfield Commons, her apartment complex in Northwest Charlotte, when the remote lock engaged. The vehicle could be parked. It would not restart. She sat in the car for what the report estimates was 5 to 7 minutes before exiting the vehicle, at which point she encountered 2 units from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, who had been directed to the location via GPS coordinates provided during the initial call. She told the officers the vehicle had been given to her. They asked for documentation. She had none. They asked for the registered owner's name. She gave mine. They called me. I was still on the dance floor. The reception had moved to the second set, upbeat now, guests in groups and moving, when my phone buzzed. I stepped outside again. The officer confirmed the report, confirmed the vehicle, confirmed my statement. I confirmed that I had reported it. He said, "The vehicle is being towed to impound. Is there anything else you need from us tonight?" I said, "No, thank you for responding so quickly." He said, "Have a good rest of your evening, ma'am." I stood outside for a moment after the call. The evening was warm. The gardens at the Larkspur estate were lit with small white lights. Inside, through the glass doors, I could see the dance floor filling up. I could hear the band. I could hear people laughing. Cassidy was charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, a Class 1 misdemeanor under North Carolina statute. The towing fee was $285. The fine, at minimum schedule, was $1,000. There would be a court date. There would be a record. My mother called at 6:12 p.m. I saw her name on the screen while I was dancing. I pressed the side button to silence it. I kept dancing. At 11:47 p.m., James and I were in the car on the way to our hotel. My phone lit up with a text from Cassidy's number. 5 words. "You really did that to me." No context, no question, no acknowledgement that she had taken a car that wasn't hers on the day I got married. Just, "You did this to me." As if the sequence of events were reversed. As if my calling the police was the original transgression, and her taking the vehicle was the reaction. I read it once. I screenshot it. I put my phone in my bag. James was driving. He glanced over. I said, "She texted." He said, "What'd she say?" I told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's what she said." Yeah. He didn't say anything else. He reached across and took my hand and held it for the rest of the drive. That was the right thing to do. He was always good at knowing what the right thing was. We went to Asheville for 4 days. The Blue Ridge in September is extraordinary. Cold mornings, warm afternoons, the mountains doing that thing where the light hits the ridgeline and everything turns amber. We hiked. We ate well. We slept in. I didn't answer any calls from home. By the end of the first day, I had 7 missed calls from my mother and 3 texts from Cassidy, of which the one I'd already read was the only substantive one. The other 2 were variations of the same injured silence. I didn't respond to any of them. On the 3rd night, lying in bed in the dark with James asleep beside me, I picked up my phone and played my mother's voice note. She had sent it on the 2nd day, 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I lay there and listened to all of it. She cried. She said Cassidy hadn't meant any harm. She said she didn't understand why I had to call the police. She said I had embarrassed the family at my own wedding. She said, Cassidy is really struggling, Natalie. You know that. She said she thought I could have handled it differently. She said she hoped I knew she loved me. I listened to all 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I set the phone face down on the nightstand. I looked at the ceiling of the hotel room. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't the thing I'd expected to feel after 18 months of slowly, carefully deciding that I was done arranging myself around other people's needs. I was tired. Bone tired and very quiet inside. The way you are after a long run when the effort has been spent, and what's left is just the breath and the body and the honest weight of where you are. I fell asleep. We came home on a Wednesday. I went back to work Thursday. The ICU floor at Atrium Health is its own ecosystem. Codes and vitals, and the particular intimacy of being with people at the outer edges of their lives. I knew every nurse on the floor, knew the rhythms of the unit, knew where everything was. It was one of the few places where I was competent without consequence, where being good at my job never cost me anything. The first morning back, I parked in the Atrium Health lot, the same lot where my father had died in the building 10 years before, the same building where I had run toward this work in the first place, and sat in the car for a moment before going in. The overhead lights of the lot made everything fluorescent and flat. I looked in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize my own face for a second, not because I had changed, because I had been looking at other people's faces for so long, watching for disappointment, for approval, for the small signals that told me whether I was safe to exist in a given moment, that I had stopped checking my own. I sat there and looked at my reflection and thought, I've been monitoring everyone else's expression for years. I don't know what mine does when no one is watching. I got out of the car. I went to work. An ICU colleague named Donna. Different Donna, not my mother. I've always thought the coincidence was not a coincidence, but some kind of joke the universe told itself. Said when she saw me, "How was the wedding?" And I said, "It was good. It was really good." And when I said it, I meant it. The day itself, the vows, the dancing, James's hand on my back, the music, all of it had been true, and it had been mine. What happened in the parking lot had not touched that. I had not let it. That was the first thing I understood clearly, in the weeks after, that I had not let it touch the day, and that choosing that, staying on the dance floor, keeping my face still, letting the system do what the system does, that hadn't been coldness, it had been self-preservation. A form of it, anyway. 3 weeks after the wedding, I called my mother. I asked if she would meet me. I said I needed us to talk somewhere other than her house. I said I needed a neutral space. She asked why. I said, because when we're at your house, it's always your house and I'm always a guest. I need us to be on even ground for this conversation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said okay. We met at Drip Coffee on South Boulevard on a Thursday morning. She was already there when I arrived. She looked smaller than I remembered somehow. She had a coffee she hadn't touched. She was wearing the cardigan she wears when she's nervous. She doesn't know she does it, but she always reaches for that particular cardigan. Dark blue, a little worn at the elbows. She'd had it for years. I sat down across from her. I ordered a coffee. I looked at her. I said, Mom, I need to tell you some things I've never said. She nodded. She wrapped her hands around her cup. I took my phone out and set it on the table between us. I had the Zelle records open. I turned the screen toward her. I walked her through it, the $400 a month for 18 months after Dad died. The tuition payment, the roof, other smaller things. I did the math aloud. She watched the numbers as I moved through them. When I got to the total, $7,200 over the first 18 months alone, before the larger one-off contributions. She was very still. She said, I didn't know it was that much. I said, I know you didn't. That's part of what I'm trying to tell you. She started to say something. I could see it forming, the familiar pivot. The way she would say you never needed to do that, or I would have figured something out, or any other sentence that would allow us to exit this moment without having to sit in it. And I said very gently, Mom, let me finish. She stopped. She nodded. I told her about the canceled overtime shifts. I told her about the loan she called a gift. I told her about the Christmas camera. I told her about the birthday with the $25 gift card and every birthday after that. I told her about the 11 phone calls in 3 months that all started with a request. I did not say any of this to punish her. I said it because it was true and I had never said it. And I had come to understand that silence in the service of keeping the peace is not the same thing as peace. She was crying by then. Not dramatically. My mother is not a dramatic crier. Just quietly, the way people cry when they are confronted with something they didn't know they'd done. She said, "I didn't mean for it to be that way." I said, "I know." And I believed it. I want to be very clear. I believed my mother when she said she hadn't meant for it to be that way. She was not a malicious person. She was a woman who had lost her husband at 51 and had needed things and had reached for the person who always seemed to be able to provide them and had never asked, never thought to ask, what the cost was on that person's end. That is a failure. It is not a villainy. The difference matters. But I also said this. The fact that you didn't mean it doesn't change what happened. And I need you to know what happened. She nodded. She didn't argue. Then I said the thing I had come to say. The thing that had lived in me for years, behind the steadiness and the capable face and the accounts that balanced and the shifts that got covered. Mom, I spent years believing I was selfish because every time I had something, someone else needed it more. Every time I said no, it became a problem. So I stopped saying no. And after a while, I stopped even recognizing the impulse to say no. I just gave. And somewhere in there, I started to believe that was my character. That I was someone who took up too much space unless I was giving it away. I stopped. I made sure she was listening. I was not selfish. I was 22 years old and scared and grieving and doing the best I could. And I deserved to have someone notice that. She put her hand over her mouth. I said, "I love you. I'm not going anywhere. But I can't go back to the way things were. I need you to understand why." She nodded again. She was very still. I said one more thing. "I won't be talking to Cassidy for a while. That's not a permanent decision, but it needs to be space, real space, before I can figure out what there is to say to each other. And I need you to respect that." She said quietly, "What happened at the wedding," I said, "was a consequence. She took my car. I reported it. That's all." She didn't say anything else. We sat there for another few minutes. I finished my coffee. She didn't touch hers. When I stood up to leave, she reached out and touched my hand. Just for a second, just her fingers on the back of my hand. A small gesture that meant something without saying anything. I let it happen. I put my hand over hers briefly. Then I said, "I'll call you soon." And I walked out. The sunlight on South Boulevard was bright. I stood by my car for a moment and breathed the air. I didn't feel light exactly. I didn't feel the release I'd imagined when I'd rehearsed this in my head over the years. I felt something more like accurate. Like I had named the shape of something that had existed for a long time but had no name before. And now that it was named, it could be known. Not fixed. Known. I drove home. That was 15 months ago. It's November now, November 2025. And I am a charge nurse in the ICU at Atrium Health, a position I've held since August, 8 months after the wedding. My supervisor, whose name is Patricia and who has been nursing for 31 years, told me when she offered it, "You've always been this good. I just feel like you've been more present lately." I thanked her and meant it. I didn't explain, but I knew what had changed. The energy that had been going elsewhere, the monitoring, the managing, the maintenance of a family dynamic that required constant tending, that energy was here now, in the work, in my own life. James and I bought a house in Matthews, east of Charlotte. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with an old oak tree, a garage wide enough for the Tesla. The first time I drove the car into that garage, I sat there after the door came down with the engine off and the screen showing one word, home. I sat and looked at that word for a little while. I thought about the first time I'd sat in the car at Holbrook Auto Systems, and the screen had said, "Welcome, Natalie." I thought about how much distance there was between those 2 words, and how long it had taken to travel it. From welcome to home, from someone acknowledging you exist to somewhere you actually belong. I called my mother about once a month now. Our calls lasted 8 to 12 minutes. They were different from before, smaller, more careful, not worse exactly, just resized. She asked about work. She told me about her garden. She didn't ask for things. Maybe she was learning. Maybe she'd always been capable of this and just hadn't needed to be. I didn't know. I tried not to need to know. About Cassidy. 11 months after the wedding, she applied for an internship at a media agency in Uptown Charlotte. The background check returned the misdemeanor. The offer was rescinded. She sent me a message, the first substantive one since you really did that to me. It said, "I've been thinking. I don't think I understood what I was doing." I read it 3 times. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of everything that led to that moment or everything that followed it, but something I hadn't heard before. She had put herself in the sentence as the subject. She had named her own understanding, or the lack of it, as the issue. For Cassidy, that was something, not enough, but something. I screenshot it. I didn't answer. I put my phone down and went to finish making coffee. I didn't know if I would answer eventually. I was still figuring that out. I was leaving that door neither open nor closed, just present. Something I'd deal with when I was ready, or when I understood better what I wanted from it. One evening in October, I sat at the desk in our second bedroom and wrote a letter to my father. I do this sometimes. He's been gone for 10 years, and I have things to say to him that I never got to say, or that I didn't understand until after he was gone. This letter I wrote about the wedding, about Cassidy, about the Tesla, about what I did and why, about the conversation with my mother, about the house and the job and James especially, about what it's felt like to live inside my own life for the first time instead of slightly outside it, giving it away piece by piece. And at the end, I wrote, "Dad, you told me not to let them forget I'm here. I didn't. It cost some things, but I'm still here. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough." I folded the letter, I opened the drawer of the desk, and put it inside. The $25 Target gift card was in there too. It's been in every desk I've had for 6 years. I put the letter in beside it. 2 pieces of paper in a drawer. One from a family that forgot to see me. One from me, remembering myself. I closed the drawer. The house was quiet. James was downstairs. The oak tree in the backyard was losing its leaves. You could hear them faintly against the window when the wind moved. The garage held what was mine. I had stopped waiting for anyone to give me permission to be here. That was the whole thing, really. That was the whole story, when I stripped everything else away. I had spent most of my life waiting for someone to notice, for someone to ask, for someone to say, "You can have this. You're allowed. You don't have to give it up." And at some point, somewhere between the parking lot of the Larkspur estate and this quiet house in Matthews, I had stopped waiting. Not because I stopped wanting to be seen. I still wanted that. I think most people do. But because I finally understood that the waiting itself was the thing costing me, not the people, not even the system they'd built. The waiting, the holding myself in suspension, while other people decided how much space I was allowed to take. I decided that was the difference. I decided if someone in your life has spent years telling you, with words or with silence or with the way they always seem to need something whenever you have something, that keeping what's yours is selfish, I want you to hear this. You are not selfish. You are the one they counted on. And those are not the same thing. Drop a comment if you know what I'm talking about. If you've been the strong one, the capable one, the one who figures it out. If you've sent money home and not been thanked. If you've canceled plans and not been noticed. If you've been told, in one way or another, don't be selfish for once, by someone who had no idea how much you'd already given. You're not alone in this, and you don't owe anyone the part of yourself you fought to keep.